Sonia and Frank had been living together for 5 years, and they had been blessed with 3 beautiful sons. From the outside, it seemed like they had a perfect family, but behind closed doors, Frank was not happy. He had always wanted a daughter, someone he could give away in marriage and collect a bride price from. But instead, Sonia had given him 3 sons, and he was starting to feel like it was a burden. "I don't understand why you can't give me a daughter," Frank would say to Sonia, his voice filled with frustration. "What's the point of having all these sons? They'll just sit in my house, and I'll be the one spending on them." Sonia would try to explain to him that it wasn't her fault, that it was just the way things had turned out. But Frank wouldn't listen. He would get angry and start blaming her for everything. "You're not doing something right," he would say. "You're not praying enough, or you're not eating the right foods. That's why you're only having sons." Sonia would try to defend herself, but Frank wouldn't listen. He would just keep on complaining, and soon, the atmosphere in the house started to change. Nothing Sonia did seemed good in Frank's eyes. If she cooked a meal, he would complain that it was too salty or too bland. If she cleaned the house, he would say that she hadn't done a good job. Sonia was sitting in her bedroom one day, thinking about why her husband, Frank, was being so cruel to her. She had given him 3 beautiful sons, but for some reason, he was still not happy. She thought about it for a while, and then she decided to confront him about it. She called Frank into the bedroom and sat him down. "My dear husband, I want to ask you something," she said. "Your fellow men will be angry with their wives for not giving them a male child, but you are angry with me for not giving you a female child? What is the problem? Is there anything else you want me to do, or is there another problem you have with me that you're using this as an excuse for?" Frank's face turned red with anger, and he started shouting at her. "You're a foolish woman for asking me that. Can't you see that all my friends have both male and female children? Why are you giving me only male children? You're not even trying to give me a female child." Sonia was taken aback by Frank's outburst, but she tried to remain calm. "I'm not God, Frank. I don't control who gives birth to what. It's not my fault that I've only given you sons." But Frank wouldn't listen. He kept shouting at her, telling her that it was because she wasn't eating the right foods, that she should go and ask her friends' wives what they ate and how they did things so that she could learn from them. "If you can't give me a female child, then there will be no peace in this house," he exclaimed. Sonia was shocked by Frank's words. "What kind of man are you?" she asked. "Your fellow men only complain when their wives give them only female children, but you're complaining because I'm giving you male children. Don't you know that male children can inherit your properties and take care of you when you're old?" But Frank just shook his head. "I don't care about that. I want a female child, and I want her now. I'm a good husband, I provide for this family, and we don't lack anything." Sonia found herself developing a habit of approaching anyone in the village who had a female child, asking them what they did to give birth to girls. She would explain to them that her husband was seriously in need of a female child, and she didn't know what to eat or do to make it happen. "I don't know what to do," she would say to them. "My husband is always on my case about having a female child. He says he needs one by all means, that he loves female children more than male children." The villagers would look at her with surprise and concern. "But why does your husband need a female child so badly?" they would ask. "Men usually love male children more than female children. What's going on?" Sonia would explain that her husband wanted a female child so he could collect bride price from her when she got married. "He says it's a way for him to make money and feel proud," she would say. The villagers would shake their heads and try to console her. "You should relax your mind, Sonia," they would say. "A female child or male child comes from God. You can't control it. Just be prayerful and trust that God will bless you with a female child one day. But Sonia couldn't shake off the feeling that she was somehow failing her husband. She would leave the villagers' homes feeling more anxious and worried than before. She didn't know what to do or how to make her husband happy. Sonia conceived again, and Frank was over the moon with joy. He was convinced that this time, his wife would finally give him the female child he had been longing for. Throughout her pregnancy, Frank was extremely attentive and caring, doing everything in his power to ensure that Sonia was comfortable and happy. "What do you want, my dear?" he would ask her every day. "Is there anything you need? Just let me know, and I'll make sure you get it. I just want you to be happy and healthy, and to give me a beautiful baby girl." Sonia, on the other hand, was a bit perplexed. She had asked many women who had given birth to female children for advice, but they all told her that there was no secret to it. That it was just the will of God. So, she didn't know what to ask for, but she didn't want to disappoint her husband either. She started requesting for all sorts of things, just to make him happy. As the months went by, Sonia's belly grew bigger and bigger, and Frank's excitement grew with it. He would rub her belly and talk to the baby, saying, "Come on, little girl, come out and meet your daddy." Finally, the day of delivery arrived, and Sonia went to the village midwife, who was experienced in delivering babies. The midwife helped Sonia through the labor, and after what seemed like an eternity, Sonia gave birth. As she raised her head and asked the midwife, "What did I deliver?" the midwife smiled and said, "You delivered 2 bouncing baby boys." Sonia's face fell, and she started crying. She had been hoping against hope that she would finally give her husband the female child he so desperately wanted, but it seemed that fate had other plans. She couldn't bear the thought of facing her husband and telling him that she had given birth to 2 more boys. As soon as Frank heard that his wife had given birth, he rushed to the midwife's house to welcome his bouncing baby girl. But unfortunately, when he arrived, the midwife came to him with a different news. "Congratulations, your wife just gave birth to 2 bouncing baby boys," the midwife said with a smile. Frank's face turned red with anger. "What do you mean, another boy? 2 boys? What is really wrong with this woman?" he exclaimed. The midwife was taken aback by Frank's outburst. "Ah, what is the problem?" she asked, surprised. Frank shouted at her, "Where is she?" "I said, where is that so-called wife of mine?" The midwife pointed to the room where Sonia and the babies were. And Frank immediately went there, still fuming with anger. He started shouting at Sonia, "Have you come to ruin my old age? You don't want me to collect the bride price of a female child in my house? You don't want me to call my fellow men to come and enjoy the palm wine that will be brought on the heads of my daughters?" Sonia tried to calm him down. "Ah, calm down, my husband. Just calm down. With time, God will give us a female child. It's not my fault." But Frank was beyond consolation. "Everything I did for you during your pregnancy, and all you could pay me back with is 2 male children at once. Twins at that? You know what? Immediately you leave this place, you should go straight to my father's house. I don't want to see you in my house again, and I don't want those 2 male children, in my house again. I'm fed up, I need a female child." Frank saved his anger and walked away, leaving Sonia in tears. She broke down, asking God why this had happened to her. "Why did this have to happen to me?" she cried. The midwife came to console her. "You are not God, my dear. God gives children, and with time, you will give birth to a female child. Don't worry, it's not the end of the world." Frank returned home that very day, still fuming with anger. He sat down in his sitting room, grooming himself, and started thinking out loud. "I was saying that women are so wicked. They can't give you what you want. They will always love to make men angry in their marriage. Now, I need a female child to collect their bride price when they are due to marry. But this woman, Sonia, will not give me a female child. What did I do wrong to her? Why is she doing this to me? He shook his head, still trying to understand why Sonia couldn't give him what he wanted. She's going back to her father's house. She cannot remain in my house and be giving me boys to train. I need female children that I will collect their bride price. I married her, and I also want another man to come into my house and marry my own children when I come of age. Now, my fellow men, my friends, will be collecting bride price from the heads of their female children, and I will be sitting here, going to marry from another family instead of men coming to marry from my own family, so that I will be called a great in-law or even a good in-law. Frank's anger and frustration were still evident in his voice. But no, she doesn't want that. What she wants is how to produce and give me male children, which I don't want. Although I want them, at least she should have mixed them with female ones, and not give me all as male, as he continued to talk to himself. Frank's anger started to subside, replaced by a sense of determination. I know what I'm going to do. Since Sonia has refused to give me a female child, I will go and marry another woman. Maybe that one will give me a female child that I will collect their bride price. I really want men to come and marry from my home, so that I will be called a great man, and I will invite my friends, so that they will follow me and drink palm wine on the heads of my daughters. Yes, that is the only solution. I am going to marry a second wife. Sonia carried her new 2 baby-born twins to her father's house, returning home with a heavy heart. She had the other male children she had given birth to with her, and as she walked into her father's house, she couldn't help but break down in tears. Why me, God, she cried, asking for answers. Why do I have to be involved with a man who desires female children more than male children? What did I do wrong? Her mother, seeing her daughter's distress, immediately went to console her. My dear, you are not God who gives children, she said, trying to calm Sonia down. With time, your husband may come back to you. We just have to be patient and trust in God's plan. Sonia's mother gave her a warm hug, trying to comfort her. You are not alone in this, my dear. We will get through this together. And who knows, maybe one day your husband will realize that male children are just as valuable as female children. As they sat together, nursing the 2 newborn babies, Sonia's mother continued to give her words of advice. You just have to take care of yourself and these beautiful children. Don't worry about your husband right now. Just focus on being a good mother and a strong woman. Sonia nodded, trying to take her mother's words to heart. She knew she had to be strong for her children, and she was determined to give them the best life possible, no matter what her husband decided to do. On the other hand, Frank had already moved on with his life. After 3 months, he got married to another woman, a lady called Elizabeth. Frank was convinced that Elizabeth was the one who would give him the female children he so desperately desired. Elizabeth, unaware of Frank's true intentions, was happy to have married a man who seemed to love and care for her. Not quite long after their marriage, Elizabeth conceived, and Frank was over the moon with joy. He was convinced that Elizabeth would finally give him the female children he had always desired. He started pampering her, giving her everything she wanted, and making sure she was happy and comfortable throughout her pregnancy. Elizabeth, on the other hand, was thrilled to have married a man who was so lovely and caring. She felt like the luckiest woman in the world, and she couldn't wait to meet her new baby. Frank's affection and attention during her pregnancy only made her more excited to start their new life together. As the months went by, Elizabeth's belly grew bigger, and Frank's excitement grew with it. He would often rub her belly, talking to the babies, and telling them how much he loved them. He would buy her all sorts of things, from fancy clothes to delicious foods, making sure she had everything she needed to be happy and healthy. Finally, after 9 months, Elizabeth gave birth to two bouncing baby girls. Frank was overjoyed, and as he carried his two newborn baby girls in his arms, he thanked God for giving him the opportunity to have female children in his home. He blessed the day he married Elizabeth, and he couldn't stop smiling as he looked at his beautiful daughters. "I'm the happiest man in the world. I've finally got my female children, and I couldn't be more grateful to Elizabeth for giving them to me." As Frank held his daughters close, he felt like all his dreams had finally come true. He had the family he had always wanted, and he was convinced that his daughters would bring him the joy and fulfillment he had been searching for. But little did he know, the kids he had in mind might not really work out for him as he had planned. Few years later, Frank's daughters, Emma and Cynthia, grew into adults. They were now 18 years old, and Frank was excitedly waiting for the day when he would start collecting their bride price, just like his fellow men did. He would often think to himself, very soon I will be collecting their bride price and enjoying the benefits of being a father to beautiful daughters. Not quite long. Emma and Cynthia started misbehaving, keeping late nights and going out whenever they wanted, despite their father's advice to stop them. They would pay no heed to his warnings, and instead, would do all kinds of things that never impressed their father. They started keeping multiple boyfriends, some of whom Frank didn't approve of, and they would often tell him that it was their time to flex and enjoy their lives. "Dad, it's our time to have fun," they would say. "When the time comes for us to marry, we will settle down and be responsible. But for now, we just want to enjoy our lives and have a good time." Frank would try to caution them, but they would just laugh it off and tell him that he was being too old-fashioned. They would say things like, "Dad, you don't understand. This is the 21st century. We're not like the girls of your time. We're independent and we can take care of ourselves." Frank would shake his head, worried about the kind of influence his daughters were under. He would think to himself, "What kind of daughters am I raising? They're so disobedient and disrespectful. What will happen to them when they get married? Will they even listen to their husbands?" Frank decided to talk to Elizabeth about how their two children, Emma and Cynthia, were behaving. He wanted to get her advice on how to handle the situation, as he was getting increasingly worried about their behavior. He sat down with Elizabeth and explained everything to her, from their late nights to their disobedience. "Elizabeth, I don't know what to do with these girls," Frank said, exasperated. "They're not listening to me, and they're doing all sorts of things that I don't approve of. I'm worried about their future, and I don't know how to get them back on track." But to Frank's surprise, Elizabeth didn't seem to share his concerns. Instead, she just smiled and told him that the girls were just living their life. "It's their time to enjoy their life, Frank," she said. "They're young, and they should be able to experience all the things that come with being young. When they get married, they'll settle down and be responsible. But for now, let them have their fun." Frank was taken aback by Elizabeth's response. "But this is not right," he said. "It's not good for them to be behaving like this. It might even hinder them from getting married." But Elizabeth just raised her voice and told him to stop disturbing the girls. "It's their rightful time to flex and make friends and do what they want," she said. "When the time comes for them to marry, they will marry. It's not going to stop them from getting married to any man who deserves to marry our beautiful daughters." Elizabeth's words were firm, and Frank could see the determination in her eyes. She was not going to back down, and she was not going to let Frank dictate how their daughters should live their lives. Frank was shocked and saddened by Elizabeth's response, and he felt like he was losing control of the situation. As Elizabeth angrily left the room, Frank broke down into tears. "Is this how female children are supposed to be?" he cried. "Giving their parents headache and stress?" As the days went by, Emma and Cynthia continued to live the life they wanted, without any regard for their father's concerns. They would keep late nights, spend days outside without coming home, and when they were at home, they wouldn't even bother to cook or sweep the compound. Frank was at his wits' end, worried about how he was going to collect their bride price. What man in his right mind would want to marry girls like this? Frank would ask himself, shaking his head in dismay. Oh God, I wish I never chased my beautiful wife away, who respected me and gave me male children who would inherit my properties and carry on my name. It's all because of my selfishness, he would say to himself. I wanted to collect bride price from female children in my old age, just like my friends, but now it's turned out to be a burden on me, a shameful thing. Who will want to marry girls like this? He would ask himself, tears streaming down his face. Frank broke down in tears, crying out to God to forgive him for what he had done. I've really wronged my first wife, Sonia, he said, his voice shaking with regret. Sonia, wherever you are, please find a place in your heart to forgive me. I'm so ashamed of coming to your father's house to ask you to come back again, but I never knew this is what female children would bring into my life. Frank's tears flowed freely as he thought about his mistakes. He realized that he had been foolish to think that having female children would bring him joy and wealth. Instead, it had brought him shame and worry. I never knew that female children from an irresponsible mother would turn out like this, he said, shaking his head in dismay. They're all just wayward, with no respect for their father or their family. As Frank wept, he knew that he had to make amends for his past mistakes. He had to find a way to make things right, not just for himself, but for his daughters and his family. But for now, he just sat in his chair, shedding tears. As the days went by, Emma and Cynthia continued their life of sleeping around with different men, without any regard for their father's concerns or the consequences of their actions. And not quite long after, the both of them got pregnant. The news of their pregnancy spread like wildfire, and Frank was devastated when he found out. He called them into the sitting room, his face red with anger, and started shouting and yelling at them. You two have come into my life to ruin me, he exclaimed. I married your mother because I wanted female children, so I could collect bride price from them. But now that you're pregnant with no man to identify the pregnancy with, that means I'm not going to collect your bride price again. According to the tradition of the village, any woman who got pregnant in her father's house was considered to be tainted, and no man would want to marry her except the man who impregnated her. Frank was furious, feeling like his daughters had let him down. You two have ruined my life, he shouted. I'm supposed to be collecting bride price from you, but where am I going to collect it from? Which man in his right mind would want to marry you two? Just as Frank was about to continue his tirade, Elizabeth intervened, shouting at him to stop talking to their daughters like that. They're not the first to get pregnant in their father's house, and they won't be the last, she said. Why are you being so hard on them? Frank was taken aback by Elizabeth's defense of their daughters. Are you supporting them? He asked, his voice rising in anger. Are you giving them more morals to continue their wayward life? Elizabeth stood her ground, her eyes flashing with anger. Yes, they should live the life they want, she said. They're still in their youthful age, and they should be allowed to make their own mistakes. So many people have given birth to children in their father's house, and they're not the first or the last. Frank was furious, feeling like Elizabeth was undermining his authority. I regret the day I married you into my life as a wife, he exclaimed. It shall never be well with both of you. He angrily stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him, and sat under a tree, seething with anger and frustration. As Frank sat under the tree, he couldn't help but think about his first wife, Sonia. He remembered how she used to respect him, pamper him, and do everything to make him happy. The only thing that had driven them apart was his desire for a female child, which Sonia had never given him. Now, Frank was filled with regret, thinking about what could have been if he had allowed Sonia to stay with him. "Oh God, I regret my action of sending Sonia back to her father's house," Frank said to himself, his voice shaking with emotion. "Now I have married a monster, and she has given me devilish children. God, will I still have to live long in this situation? My heart is heavy, like I am really dying inside me. All my desire, all my thought of collecting bride price for my female children, has all failed now." Frank thought about how he had chased away the one person who had truly loved and cared for him, Sonia, who had given him male children that would inherit his properties and bear his name when he passed away. He had rejected her and her children, and now he was paying the price. How can I face the shame of going to bring her back again after the humiliation and insult I have rendered on her? Frank asked himself, feeling like he was at rock bottom. "Oh God, forgive me. This is the advice I will give to my children, if I ever have the chance to see them again or be with them again. I will tell them that whatever children their wife gives them, they should just endure it, be it female or male. They should just accept it, because they never know which one God will use to bless them or punish them. No man should ever put their hands in getting married to a second one in the name of needing a particular gender," Frank said to himself. Children are children, be it male or female, just endure it with your wife. Even if your wife does not give you a child at all, just manage the situation. Only God knows the best. As Frank sat under the tree, he broke down in tears.